Greetings, folks. Welcome back to A City Full of History. My name is Dan Thurber. I know the kings of England and can quote the fights historical from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical. And today, on A City Full of History, we are in Queens, in Woodside to be specific. And the reason that we're here is because a few weeks ago I was talking with a fella I work with, and he asked me a question that I'd never really thought of before, though I found it very interesting. He said, "Do I know what the geographic center of New York City is?" I admitted I didn't, though I found the question fascinating, and he showed me a picture of this. Now that is a marker set into the cement in the middle of Queens Boulevard at the intersection of 58th Street here in Woodside, denoting this very spot as the geographic center of New York City. There's only one problem with that. This isn't the geographic center of New York City.
We're getting out of the library and onto the street. It really is a city full of history. You just have to go out and find it.
So before we get going today, a couple of spoilers. Spoiler number one, this episode will feature an answer to the question, where is the geographic center of New York City? Spoiler number two, it may not be the most satisfying of answers. I'll explain.
You see, finding the center of a fixed geometric shape is pretty easy. There are formulas and measurements, and you can figure it out exactly. But as those shapes get bigger and more irregular and approach the size of land masses, it becomes a bit more difficult. Questions begin to arise. Do you include islands near the coastline? How about the water between the main landmass and those islands? Do you calculate at high tide or low tide? How do you go about calculating it all anyway? After 1912, when Arizona and New Mexico were admitted to the Union, thus filling out what today is the continental United States, the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey received a lot of requests from people wishing to know where the center of the United States was. To calculate it, the folks at the survey employed the center of gravity method. They basically cut out a big piece of cardboard in the shape of the United States and balanced it on a pin. The point it balanced, that was the center. It was at approximately 39 degrees, 50 minutes north, 98 degrees, 35 minutes west, a field near Lebanon, Kansas. In 1959, following the admittance of Alaska and Hawaii to the Union, the calculation was done again, with the center determined this time to be in Butte County, South Dakota. According to a paper written in 1959 by Coast and Geodetic Survey senior mathematician Oscar S. Adams, this method was hardly perfect, and was only one of the several methods they proposed. His opinion was that the question, where is the center, had no practical application, but the people wanted an answer, so the survey found a way to give them one. It is inevitable that there are as many geographical centers of a state or country or other area as there are persons determining them. Any reasonable method employed will give a center as satisfactory as any other one. This is a case in which all may differ, but all be right.
Now I know what you're thinking. Math with cardboard. What could possibly be more accurate than that? Well, as it turns out, a lot of things. You see, as clever a solution to the center problem as the center of gravity method was, it wasn't actually all that accurate for two main reasons. The first one, well, you're doing this with cardboard. So it's not going to be all that accurate. You're not going to find a piece of cardboard big enough to be able to get all of the necessary details to really end up with an accurate solution. The second problem is that you're using a flat piece of cardboard, whereas the surface of the Earth is very curved, which means that anytime you take a curved surface and put it on a flat plane, regardless of the type of map projection you're using, Lambert, Mercator, etc., you're always going to have distortions. You're never going to have a completely accurate solution as a result. Now, in 2015, a college professor at the University of Buffalo named 2017, Peter Rogerson came up with what he felt was a much more accurate solution to this problem. Taking into account the curvature of the Earth, he devised a computer model that he said could accurately pinpoint the center of the United States. And his center was located in the very ironically pleasantly named town of Center, North Dakota. Now, even he said that his projection could be made to be more accurate by taking into account outlying islands along the U.S. coastline, as well as the fact that he used a perfect sphere for his model, not the actual shape of the Earth.
Back to New York City. As far back as 1942, and continuing for more than 50 years, references to the center of the city used a point in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, between Van Buren Street and Green Avenue, and Stuyvesant Avenue and Malcolm X Boulevard. Today, that spot is on the Jesse Owens Playground. How they came up with that point is unknown, but nobody questioned it for a good long time.
In 2005, a New York Times reader wrote to Streetscapes columnist Christopher Gray and asked him, what is the geographic center of New York City? Gray reached out to the New York City Department of City Planning and was told that the geographic center is in Bushwick, northern Bushwick, just off of Wyckoff Street. A few years later, in 2013, the New York City Department of Transportation came out and said that the geographic center of New York City was indeed in Bushwick, but a little further to the south, on Broadway at the intersection of DeKalb Street. It's a few blocks behind me there. When I first started going down this rabbit hole, I reached out to the Department of City Planning myself and asked them what the geographic center of the city was. They got back to me very quickly. They were very kind, very helpful. They sent me the projection that they used for their calculations and said that the geographic center of the city, according to their method, was a few blocks west of DeKalb Street, on Broadway in Bushwick, underneath the J train, in between Dodworth and Lawton Streets. And even they were pretty quick to point out that it's an inaccurate calculation at best and depends entirely upon the definition you use for the center. So back here to Woodside, to Queens Boulevard and 58th Street, and the marker in the sidewalk. After all this, I have no idea still who put that marker there, or why, or when. In the year 2000, Walter McCaffrey, who was a city councilman for this area, referenced Woodside as being the geographic center of the city, but I was unable to confirm that it was put here during his tenure, though it seems like a plausible theory. I contacted 3 different city agencies about the marker, and none of them seemed to have any idea either. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, the spot on the ground that's declared the geographic center of the city. As Oscar Adams wrote, it's a question in which all may differ and all may be correct, so the center could be different for each individual New Yorker. And I figure that's probably the most important thing anyway. On that philosophical note, for Bookworm History, I'm Dan Thurber. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for stopping by.